feared and feared through Killarney. Now I'm back to hitching with the wind. But if Mickey Flynn should ever find me, I'll throw me caution all behind me and square off on that son of a bitch again. He cracked open a river too, he beat me Sunday through and through, and such over my unconscious frame. I won me healthy sheriff fights, well lucky son still had me life since Mickey Flynn beat me dumb and lame.
What is going on, guys? We are chasing the pennant tonight. I am your host tonight. I am Sean, and I'm joined today by a special guest. You probably know him from 94 WIP and the High Hopes podcast. He is a Bloomsburg Husky athlete of the decade runner-up.
Yep.
I am joined here by Jack Fritz. What's going on, Jack?
Second most votes. The fans voted me as the second most deserving, I guess, of Husky of the decade. And I thought it was ridiculous that in their actual objective voting, I was not named number one, given that I was a pitcher there for 2 years and my ERA was around 9. I think that it's usually justifiable for being the Husky of the decade, but it's nice to see that the fans were on the right side of history there.
Yeah, that was an interesting thing to follow, and when it came out, I was a little upset with you and the rest of the High Hopes fandom. But, Jack, there's a lot of things to talk about in the Phillies world, especially like the baseball world right now. And even with no baseball, there's still some interesting topics. Like you guys touched on the draft a lot on your show on Sunday or Saturday, and I wanted to get some opinions on some of the guys we took. So I'm actually going to start backwards and let us kind of work with things that we haven't been able to think about or talk about yet. I want to get your opinion on some of the undrafted free agents that the Phillies have signed in the last week that have come out. Specifically, some of the guys like the one we signed 2 hours ago, Blake Brown. That news came out on Twitter. I know you have a lot to say about him, so I guess I'll let you start with that one.
Well, here's what the Phillies did today, or what the Phillies have pretty much done this entire undrafted free agent period, is that they've been going after guys with high spin rates, guys that throw hard, and guys that it's not even just the fastball spin rate that they've been going after. It's also like curveball spin rates, and they've just been doing a really, really good job of going after guys that have tangible stuff. And I don't know why they're all signing with the Phillies. I think it's very interesting. When the draft is going on, and it was kind of coming down to the end and whatnot. Like I thought the Phillies were going to have a good chance to sign a good amount of undrafted free agent bats, just because of Ochart and the driveline guys they have there. They have more driveline hitting guys, I think, than pitching guys. But the fact that they've been so aggressive and they've gotten so many of these pitching guys, I think is massive for their player development. Like, I mean, these are guys that usually the Astros would sign, usually the Yankees would sign, because everyone is in the same ballpark. It's only $20,000. So it's not like that they have all kinds of money to be throwing at guys. Everyone's in the same playing field, and basically what the Phillies have had to do is they've had to make their sales pitch to these guys. They've had to say, this is why you should sign with us over these other teams, because it's an equal playing field at $20,000. And the fact that they've been able to sign, like in my mind, I think Blake Brown, Chase Antle, McKenna he's a pitcher, he's a high school pitcher, but like Antle, Blake Brown, Noah Skid Row, and Billy Sullivan are 4 guys that usually smart teams are all over. They throw hard, they have good spin rates, and they should be able to rise pretty fast through the system because of their power stuff, and they should be in the back of the bullpen. So, like, it's I'm just ecstatic that they were able to sign guys that smart organizations are signing. And Blake Brown's a guy that, like, I thought right before the draft kind of started, he was getting some second or third round buzz, and like the fact that they were able to get him where they did, I think is huge. And in his last bullpen, he was up to 100.5 miles an hour. He had a spin efficiency of 98%, which is insane. The spin rates on that fastball were in the 2,500 range, which if you have a 2,500 for a four-seam fastball is elite spin rate for a four-seam fastball. His curveball was in the 2,700 or 25 to 2,700 range, which is good, but it's a power curveball. Like I think Pavetta's was like in the 2,900. So I mean that's like an elite curveball. So just the fact that he can spin it as much as he can, like to me, they signed two guys that can definitely close. I think Chase Ansel can close. I think Blake Brown is probably going to be a closer. I think Sullivan could be, but I would bet on the other guys more. And then Skirrow is more of a starter type. But I really, really excited about Blake, Chase, Billy, and Noah Skirrow. And it's a good time. And I don't know if the Phillies have just decided to be a smart organization, but and I don't know if Matt Klentak's been allowed to make any of these picks because he usually likes guys that throw 92 and have no spin. So it's nice to see them evolving as an organization.
Right. So do you think these guys dropped out of, the top 5 rounds? And obviously if this was a regular draft, they'd probably get drafted in, maybe the early teens or even the next couple of rounds. But do you think these guys dropped out of the first 5 rounds because their ceiling is a bullpen pitcher, or do you think, they might have some problems to them?
Well, I think it's definitely the bullpen pitcher side of it, because if you're like, why would you waste a draft pick in a 5-round draft on a bullpen guy? Like, you need to kind of take a swing and possibly miss. So and like, for example, like Chase and Blake Brown, Jonathan Hughes. And I think those were it. I think Chase, Jonathan Hughes, and Blake Brown were all 4-year guys. So like they had no leverage anyway. So like, why would you kind of? There's no real reason to draft those guys when you like. There's no pressure on them to sign. Like they're gonna take their $20,000 and sign. Like they're not going back to campus. So I think that played into it a little bit. Like these guys are a little bit older. That's what makes Jake McKenna so interesting, because he obviously had the scholarship from St. Joe's, and for a high school kid to kind of bet on himself and sign for $20,000 is interesting. Not many high school guys signed, but I guess his reasoning was that it seems like St. Joe's is going to kind of cut their program, might cut scholarships. So if he can kind of take a chance on signing for that $20,000. And then still get enough money to pay for a 4-year institution like the Phillies put it in his contract, I guess there's a reason to take that signing. So yeah, it's interesting, and I think a lot of these guys do project to be bullpen guys, but that's fine. The Phillies obviously need help in their bullpen, so it's nice that they got guys that should be pretty fast risers. Like, now, Chase Ansel does have control issues. If you throw 100, generally you're going to have control issues, and you can kind of sort that out in the minor leagues. But just the fact that they took a chance, I think, is massive.
Right. I love that. I love that they're starting to take chances with these guys. And I just didn't understand completely why they announced that they signed 8 guys. I think it was yesterday morning. They announced that they signed 8 guys, and every single one was pitchers. And I just felt like, to me, like, obviously they needed the bullpen help. They need more depth in the pitching side, but it's just a little weird that they didn't take any, fielders.
Yeah.
Now, is that across the board, or is that just for the Phillies?
Well, I think there's more time. And obviously, like, Blake Brown was just signed a little bit ago, so there's more out there. But that's surprising to me as well. I guess they're kind of just taking as many shots at a dartboard and seeing how many can stick. Because, I mean, listen, if you can find guys that throw 100, they're starting to become more of a thing, but it's still hard to find. And really, I don't know how many hitters were going to come out in this draft. I mean, the weather was cold for most of these guys. They only played for, I don't know, like a month max before everything got shut down. So, if you're a pitcher, like, are you going to take the $20,000, get the full tuition, and not risk going back to school and getting an arm injury and then being done? Like, and that's just, there's a lot more likelihood for injury if these guys go back to school as pitchers rather than hitters, and hitters are kind of betting on their own upside. So I don't think there was as many hitters that became available. I haven't seen, like, there's been obviously a couple hitters have signed, but it seems like overwhelmingly it's pitchers. So yeah, I think that's more the reasoning behind it.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay. And then one more thing, because the only guy we got out of high school was Jake McKenna, and you touched on this, how he bet on himself with the 20,000 with the Phillies. Do you think he did that because he's from here? Like how you said we might take Bitsko because he's from here. He knows how Philadelphia works. Do you think that's why McKenna chose to sign with the Phillies, is because he got that opportunity?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think that he saw an opportunity where his hometown team reached out to him. They're one of the teams that are most interested in him. And, I mean, he's been a season ticket holder, I think, since 2014, which is great to see. Love to see that. Now, I wish they would have thought the same of me back in 2012, but it's not I guess you can't do that. So it's okay. But, yeah, I definitely think that. I think the Phillies, being his hometown team and being a fan of the team, sure, going to St. Joe's and being able to participate there and for 3 or 4 years and hopefully getting drafted and maybe go higher and sign for more than $20,000 is still a dream come true. But if you're 18, your dream team comes calling. Sure, it's only $20,000, but they're giving you a chance on a dream. I don't know how you turn that down. I don't know how you don't take the chance and say, hey, I have a chance to go to my hometown favorite team and kind of go from there and see what we can do. And the fact that the Phillies are covering guys' tuitions if they go back to school, this doesn't work out for them, I think is also huge as well. So, yeah, I definitely think the Phillies played a huge part in him coming here.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if I was in the same position and I had the same talent that he did, I would do the same thing. I'd bet on myself. I'd take the 20,000, especially being from South Jersey. It's that would be a dream of mine. And I mean, he sat through some of the worst Phillies seasons in recorded history, so I'm sure he is excited to hop on the Phillies when they start trending in the upper direction, hopefully.
Yeah, he seems pretty good too. I haven't seen too much on him, but he's 88 to 92. Looks like he gets decent leverage on his pitches. I think obviously as he grows, he should develop more on his fastball. I could see him hitting 94, 95. And I like what I saw the action out of the slider. So it's a risk, but I mean he was in the top 500 prospects in Baseball America, so he probably would have been like a 20-some round guy. And usually they don't usually make it. But again, like if your hometown team comes calling, and like I don't know how you turn that down.
Exactly. So moving on to some of the guys that we actually drafted, some of the guys that you already touched on in your most recent podcast, but I'd like to kind of retouch on them. We'll start again going backwards. We'll go through the 5th round pick in Barron Radcliffe, and I liked what you had to say about him, other than his subpar average in his last couple seasons in college ball. He's got a lot of pop, and I'm starting to hear some interesting comps to him. But I'll let you run with Radcliffe for a sec.
Yeah, I like the chance of taking the power upside with him. Now the numbers in the Cape are kind of concerning. Like a 237 average isn't great, especially because the talent in the pitching side of the Cape is not where it used to be. Like you don't see the level of hitters comparable to the pitchers there, because a lot of the schools are like, hey, don't go waste innings up there. Like save the innings for us, and like you don't need to go pitch a full college season and then go to the Cape and then come back in the fall. Like your arm kind of could get worn down. So really, the pitching talent in the Cape isn't really where it used to be. So for him to hit 237 there isn't great. But the kid seems awesome. Like just following him on Twitter and stuff, he joked around about the meme that he created a meme pretty much after the Harper called him, which is also cool that Bryce is calling everyone.
Oh, absolute leader. Yeah,
I mean, he didn't do that stuff in Washington, so this is kind of Bryce developing into the leader on this team as he continues to be the best. So, yeah, I like him. The power's real. The swing and miss is also real. He reminds me a lot of Eric Taines. Like when Eric Taines came back from playing overseas. It was a lot of power, but a lot of strikeouts and a low average. And that's a valuable player in today's baseball, where it's only really 3 outcomes. So I think the power is legit. I think it could develop into something. I'm not like there's been a little bit too much of the Ryan Howard stuff thrown around. Like that's not something that I'm comfortable going after
Right.
on the good old takes. But I think there's a player in there, and I think swing and miss is actually probably the hardest to teach from a drive line kind of perspective. But the pop is real, so it's a nice shot. It's a good chance in the 5th round on a guy that can just really hit the ball far. So I like it. I wish the swing and miss wasn't there, but if the swing and miss was there, he would be a top 2 round guy. So you kind of take a chance and go from there.
Right. And I will say the most common comparison that I've seen is Ryan Howard, but the second most common comparison, and when I saw this, I don't know if you've seen this anywhere on your Twitter, but when I saw this and I saw him swing, I saw the highlights of him. I haven't looked into him as much as you have, but when I watched the swing, I saw it was almost like a reflection, and that's Dominic Brown. And that's something I want to take I want to hear your take on that one.
Well, I think the bat's quicker than Dom Brown. The one thing I never saw with Dom Brown was the fast hands. Like, he was strong, he had that lanky strength, but I never saw a really fast bat. I always thought you could beat Dom Brown in, and that bared out to be true. But I think Barron has a bit more bat speed than him. He also uses a smaller bat. I think Dom Brown uses a bigger bat. But I do think that I think Ratcliffe has a hole. He has a hole up and in, and fastballs up. So that's another a Dom Brown thing. But I think his bat's faster than Dom's. I don't really see the Dom Brown comparison. I see more. Again, I just see Eric Thames, but that's just me.
Yeah, and when you said that, I kind of saw the same thing. The more I watched, the more I saw it was Eric Thames. But when we first drafted him and I started seeing the highlights from everybody on Twitter, I started to think, oh my God, this might be the reincarnated Dom Brown, just taking how many rounds earlier. But
who didn't love another Dom Brown? I mean, anytime you can draft a guy that turns into the 3rd best prospect in baseball and then it's just dreadful, would love to take that again. So great, awesome, another Dom Brown. Let's hope he's better than Dom Brown.
It would be hard not to be, although he did have an All-Star appearance, and he flashed some brilliance for 2 seasons.
Not sure that All-Star game. Not sure that All-Star game ever happened. Just like I'm not sure the Rick Porcello Cy Young season actually happened.
Well, I'm glad you bring that up. I guess we can jump into, since you brought up Rick Porcello, we can jump to the 1st round pick, Mick Abel. We'll jump around a little bit. I see where the Rick Porcello comparison comes from with Mick Abel. I definitely want to forget that happened, just like you, but I enjoy the Verlander and Strasburg comparisons, and the one that sticks out the most to me out of all the comps that I've seen on Twitter is Joe Giglio's, and I'm sure you know where I'm going with this, but he said the more I watch his stride, his windup, the more he looks like A.J. Burnett. And that's kind of where I envision him, maybe not with the same outcome of his career, but I see A.J. Burnett a lot in his windup.
Yeah, the Burnett thing was interesting. When I saw it, I kind of looked at it and I saw a little bit, but the only difference for me with AJ Burnett and him was obviously AJ turned his back to home plate a little bit more. And I don't think that Mick has as wipe out of a knuckle curve as AJ Burnett had. Like, AJ Burnett was disgusting. I mean, he had no idea where the ball was going, but he was nasty there for a couple of years. Of course, he's terrible when he comes here, and then goes back to the Pirates and is back to being AJ Burnett. So just add that to the list. But yeah, the thing about I see it a little bit with the Burnett thing. I just personally, my main comp to that was Mark Pryor. And I know people don't like to hear about Mark Pryor, but unfortunately, that's what we got. And he has the same thing where he's very smooth mechanics. The ball jumps. It's kind of diving all over the place, and like his fastball just really reminds me of Mark Pryor's a lot. And then I think when the slider's on, and it's only going to get better from here. I think that has a lot to do with it. Now my concern with Mick though is obviously the injury concerns. Like there could definitely be injuries and that, but I think he needs to clean his mechanics a little bit. But I think when you're talking about the 15th pick in the draft, like you just have to take a shot on a guy like that who has been the best prep arm in the draft for the last couple of years. I mean, he's been regarded in that class. Like Jared Kelly was kind of up there. He started falling down a little bit, and I never really thought he was that great. Mick was always 1A, 1B with Jared Kelly. Then Bitsko kind of got involved. And even though I like Bitsko a little bit more just because I trust his body, I still think that at 15, you kind of got to take a shot and try to go for a home run. And had he been able to pitch this year, like I think Mick Abel would have been a top 10 pick. And I still think he should have been a top 10 pick. And the fact they got him at 15, I think is crazy. But when you're just looking at the raw stuff, the fact that he can already move his two seam like he does, I know sinkers are kind of getting out for baseball, which kind of stinks. Like I always like a good sinker baller, but just being able to move your fastball like that and kind of put it on both sides of the plate, and then in the fastball, the four seamer has been up to 100, which is crazy, and then just being able to throw a slider in any count was, I think, the best thing I've seen from him. Just being able to throw that slider whenever he wants, get it over whenever he wants. Like that's going to be massive as he's coming up through the ranks. And to have a guy that has that kind of control of pitch that good, like he should be a fast riser because of that. Like if you're a hitter, you're going up against a high school kid, and he drops in a 2-1 slider, that's just hard to be ready for. And as he gets more comfortable with that, and he gets more comfortable with spotting his fastball, I think the main thing he has to work on is a changeup. You know, for the first time I saw Mick Abel throw, I just assumed he had a good changeup because in looking at his mechanics, like his mechanics just set up so perfectly for dropping in a pretty nasty changeup to couple with his two-seam sinker a little bit. So I think that's the first thing he really, really has to work on. And I think at that point, you're going to see a ceiling that only a few pitchers in the Phillies organization have ever really had.
Right. And I mean, when I first saw the highlights of him on draft night, the one video of him throwing a 3-2 slider with two runners on, I think it was the All-American game, that blew my mind. To have that much control over slider, to throw it in any count, and you brought up the Hamels comparison where he could throw a changeup in any count. You brought this up on your last podcast. What made Hamels so special was that he could throw a changeup at any point in the count and just throw off a hitter. And I feel like we have the same thing in Mick Abel where he could throw that slider at any point and catch a hitter off guard, you know, when they're least expecting it. And I mean, at age 18, he has so much room for development, so much more, you know, room to develop his fastball, develop that kind of changeup. And I'm really excited. I'm glad he dropped to us.
Oh, so am I. And it kind of stinks that there's no season this year, just because I just would have liked to see how these guys adjust and get going and see how they do in their first round of pro ball. But, you know, just the more I watch him and the more I hear about him, he just does not seem like a guy that's going to be down that long. And he doesn't seem like a guy that's going to be in the minor leagues for that long. I know that high school pitchers are tough to bet on and they're tough to kind of project, and people are always nervous about the injuries. And yeah, he needs to get stronger. But that's another thing. Like his dad is 6'5", 270, and if he can fill out a little bit, I mean that's a big dude. I mean Pryor ended up being 6'5", 220, and was between 220 and 230. So that's probably where they're going to want him to be. That's what they want most, ace horse-like guys to be at is around that size. So he needs to definitely bulk up a little bit. But I think it's good that he didn't have the wear. It's like, I think pitching 70 innings in a high school season is a lot. Mm-hmm. But especially coming off of the year that he had before, you know, he pitched with 74 innings. He won a state championship, and then he goes on the prep circuit, and he's pitching all the time. And he probably had his worst outing of the summer in the Perfect Game All-American Classic, where he was just all over the place. but that's late into the summer for a high school kid. So he might have been worn down a little bit. And just the fact that, yeah, it stinks he didn't get to play in his senior season. Like, playing senior year of high school baseball is the best thing ever. And not being able to do that stinks, but it does save you the bullets. And you don't have the arm. Like, you don't have to go out there and pitch for your high school team. You just work on the bullpen and work on, hopefully developing that changeup and getting better, and you don't have to waste it on the high school season. So maybe it's a little bit of a blessing in disguise for the Phillies here.
Yeah, I think it is, and I think he would have gone top 10, like you said, and I hope he comes up soon. I would love to see, the Phillies end up being the one calling up a 20-year-old prospect and, having him in contention with the rest of the league. I'm waiting for the Phillies turn on that. I mean, I obviously think Bohm has the potential to do that this year, but he's obviously out of college. He's not a high school guy.
Yeah, it would just be nice. It would be nice to have a phenom, just like a nice phenom that you can to get baseball really rolling back in Philly. Like, I think people are excited about Spencer Howard. They're excited about Alec Bohm, but to have a phenom and have a guy that's 20, 21, 22, coming up, making his debut and being dominant from day one, like, would just go such a long way towards getting baseball really, really rolling back in the city. Like, I actually think that there was a lot of people excited about Sixto Sanchez, and I think people were really excited to see what he was going to do. And, they heard the Pedro comparisons. They heard 100 miles an hour at 19 years old. So, and I kind of, just in my general feeling about Mick Abel and kind of reading the city, it feels like people are really excited about the pick. So he's going to have some pressure on him, but just being able to have a phenom come up and kind of join Bryce and hopefully JT and Bohm and Howard, like, it's going to feel like we have a lot of our guys, and I can't wait.
Yeah, and that's one thing that we talked about on the most recent Chasing the Pennant podcast that I was on when we recapped the draft is where we think these guys, specifically Mick Abel, because we did it on the second day of the draft, where we think Mick Abel kind of stacks up alongside all the other Phillies prospects. So obviously we did this before we got Casey Martin and before we could kind of place him where we thought. But where would you put Mick Abel, in the Phillies' top 10, say, or top 5 prospects as of right now? We're not going to see these. We're not going to see this from MLB Network or from MLB.com probably until the off season. But where would you put Mick Abel?
Just in off the top of my head, yeah. I would have him third. I know that Bryson Stott's going to reach the big leagues before him and that stuff, but yeah, I would feel comfortable having Mick Abel number 3 behind Spencer Howard and Alec Bohm, just because I think he has more upside than everyone else from a pitching standpoint in that system. Like, if you look on FanGraphs, Francisco Morales is number 5, and I think he's fine, but I think he's ultimately going to be a closer.
Right. And
then behind him, it's Adonis Medina, bullpen guy. Mauricio Olivero, he's another bullpen guy. Like, I would feel comfortable having him number 3 for sure. So I would go Howard, Bohm, Abel, Stott, Luis Garcia, I guess. But that's my 5.
Right.
And honestly, not a bad 5. It's not a great 5, but it's not a bad 5. And Abel's right there at number 3.
Yeah, he definitely fills out what seems to be like a solid top shelf of Phillies prospects. And I mean, when we talked about this, I mean, I put him behind Stott just because I have some high expectations for Stott, and you guys touched on him last time too, where he's has all 5 tools, and he's average to above average in all 5. I just have high expectations for him in the near future, so I put Abel very closely behind him. But I mean, after that, really, and Luis Garcia, you have a drop off, and I mean, hopefully some of these undrafted guys kind of fill in that pitching spot, and I don't know how soon we'll see that. But I agree. I think Mick Abel's right up there with everybody you said, right behind Howard and Bohm, and, right before Stott. I'm certainly excited for the future as far as that goes.
Yeah, and I like Stott, but to me, he just looks like a guy that's good at everything, but not great at one thing. Like, I think he's just gonna be like a 275, 15 to 20 homers, very solid defense at shortstop. just solid all across the board, high baseball IQ, all of that. But when you talk about ranking prospects, you're dreaming on what they could be, and Mick I think he's got to be right in there at number 3, because I think you're dreaming on a guy that has ace level upside, and that's what you're looking for in your prospect rankings.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm very much looking forward to him. Like I said, I hope he comes up at 20 or 21. We don't wait too long for him to, make an appearance in the majors. But while we're on the topic of shortstops, like you said, Stott, I know somebody you really wanted to talk about was Casey Martin. And you said this, the first time we reached out about doing this podcast, you said, I just want to talk about Casey Martin. So I'm going to let you, let loose on this one.
Well, Casey Martin, if you're looking for a souped-up Scott Kingery, maybe the next Dustin Pedroia, I think you found your guy. No, I really like Casey Martin, and it came out over the weekend that he's recovering, or I don't know if he had gotten it yet, or he maybe was planning on getting it. I kind of forget, but he's getting a handmade surgery, and I think that could have definitely contributed to his slow start. Like I said on high hopes, but I really do like watching him in the early season. The bat just looked slower, and when I was watching him in his couple tapes before that, like 2019 and 2018, his bat was so fast and so explosive, and it looked like some of that explosiveness had kind of gone away. And I think that had a lot to do with having the surgery, having the injury. But he seems like just a baseball dude, and it feels like he's not going to take no for an answer. He's going to grind, and that's kind of what you saw at Arkansas. He was kind of struggling at the beginning of this year. I think he started the season 1 for 9, and he got benched, and he was kind of sat down for a little bit, and they kind of overhauled his swing in the middle of the season. He got rid of the high leg kick, and he started toe tapping, and that kind of got him going a little bit. Before the season got shut down, I think he had 4 hits in a game, and 2 games before that he had 3 hits. So he was kind of starting to come out of it. And he said that he felt like he was about to have his best season yet, and he already was a really, really, really good player for Arkansas. So he felt like he was about to have his best season yet. Had he been able to do that, you're not getting him at 87. Like you're not getting a player of his talent at 87. And I was just shocked when they actually picked him. I was fully expecting some other team to kind of just take him, and I was going to be furious, and we're going to take some stupid player from the small school and whatnot. And the fact that they actually took him, I was just blown away. I was blown away by Mick Abel and Casey Martin. I was like, wow, they actually did it. They actually are starting to figure this whole draft thing out. I'm so proud of them.
Sounds like a lot of Brian Barber's influence, honestly. But
well, yeah, Matt Klentak hasn't said a word since the draft, so I would say it's been all Brian Barber. But the tools are loud. The pop's there for a guy that ultimately probably second base is his best position. Actually, might be third base. He's just so small, it's hard to project. He could actually be what Scott Kingery was, what they tried to turn him into be, which was playing all over the field. He could kind of do that, it looks like. The swing and miss is definitely a concern, but I think when you break it down and you look at the toe tapping stuff, like the strikeout numbers went down a good amount, so maybe that was kind of a tool for him. And again, I think one of the reasons why I'm so high and so in on him is that he just seems like such a baseball guy. Just like he was not drafted out of high school, even though he's the Arkansas Player of the Year. He goes to Arkansas his first year. He just jumps on the scene and kind of is the man for that Arkansas team. Just in watching some of their games, Heston Kjerstad is definitely a top tier hitter and that stuff. But Casey Martin felt like the heart and soul of that team, and it just to get that kind of infectious personality in the Philly system. Like Luis Garcia actually reminds me a lot from that standpoint. Luis Garcia is another guy that kind of has that infectious, positive grinder mentality, and just I'm all for taking guys on guys like that and taking a shot and hoping everything kind of pans out, because he seems like a guy that's not going to stop working until he figures this out. And when you have technology like the Phillies do, and they have all the driveline guys, you have Ochart, like, man, imagine when he gets around that kind of technology with his kind of work ethic, it's going to be awesome. So I really, really like that pick. He's so fast. His hands are so fast. He's got a hose from across the diamond. Everything is there for him to break out and turn into a guy. Obviously, the swing and miss is a concern, but whatever. I mean, that's just where the league's going. It's 3 outcomes, and to get that kind of production from a guy at shortstop or second base would be massive. So, yeah, I love him, and I think the handmade surgery could have definitely contributed to his slowish start this year for Arkansas.
So, do you think that by itself, or what his agent kind of said about wanting a certain salary, like what do you think contributed to him, hanging around until 87? This was supposed to be a top 30 pick, and we end up getting him in the 3rd round.
Yeah, well, I think definitely once you get to the 3rd round ridiculousness, it comes down to money. And like you saw the same thing with Cole Wilcox, the Georgia right-hander who went to San Diego, and he's going to sign for like $3.5 million. It comes down to teams that can afford him. And the Phillies strategy was basically, hey, this is a premier talent, and we're going to take him here, and we're going to go under slot in their other picks so that it almost offsets it. So again, I am all for taking a risk and taking a chance on the upside and spending the money on the upside. And if you have to go under slot to make it justifiable, that's cool. That's cool with me. There's no problems for me there. So yeah, it all comes down to money at that point. And I guess the swing and miss must have scared some teams away. And the Phillies are a team that is really invested in all technology, so it didn't really scare them away. And good, because again, I think there's a legit player there.
Yeah, I agree. I love Casey Martin from all the clips, and I mean, he really does look like a more refined Scott Kingery with most of the same tools, just maybe a little bit better. And I really tried to make sense of it, and my thought process behind that was because the Phillies didn't have a 2nd round pick, and because they went under slot in the 4th and 5th round, they really didn't have any worries that they could sign Casey Martin, and they took the chance of what was projected to be a top 30 guy, and they ran with it. And I'm glad they did. I'm glad they're taking these chances, and obviously you are too.
Yeah, no, it just feels like we finally have a smart team, and it feels like, even though there's no baseball, which sucks, I feel like we finally have a smart baseball team, and I think it's going to pay off down the road, what they've been doing, and I think this draft's going to pay off down the road, and it feels like we're kind of turning a corner here. I mean, when Matt Klentak was brought in here, the Phillies had no analytics department, and now they have one of the biggest in the sport, and maybe they're starting to finally figure out their processes, and Brian Barber maybe was the perfect guy to bring in and help take them to the next level. And going off this draft, it certainly feels that way. So yeah, I'm just ecstatic. I was so surprised at the Abel pick. Like, I was fully expecting them to take like Cade Cavalli, and I would just be bored at night and just be like sleeping bored. But Mick Abel was awesome. And then I fully expected them to take some like small school rando in the 3rd round. But they took Casey Martin, who was going to be was a 1st round pick heading into the season. So yeah, it's great stuff all around.
Well, yeah, and I'm like you. I certainly could have talked myself into a Cade Cavalli. I wouldn't have been as excited as the pick that they got, but I see him go in a draft or a mock draft to the Phillies, and my first instinct is to start looking at tape, and I wasn't as prepared, obviously, as you were. This is something you love to do. This is like a hobby for you. But for me, it was like I loved looking at the mock drafts that I could see and really figuring out who they might take, who they might get. And one guy I barely even looked at was Mick Abel, because he was projected to go so early.
Yeah.
So draft night was a good time.
Draft night was a good time. I didn't think Mick Abel would be there, and I had heard the Phillies like not really connected to them. I knew I didn't believe that they were not interested in a high school pitcher, like I was told. I thought that they were interested in high school pitching the whole time. But Mick Abel just was not a name that had been connected to them at all, and pleasantly surprised. It also feels like the thing that's also helping me sleep at night with the Mick Abel pick is that it seemed like Chaim was all over him at 17, and for the Phillies to be able to swoop in there and ruin Chaim's draft makes me happy. If me and Chaim are on the same page, I think that's a good thing for the Phillies.
I think he was so set on Mick Abel that when it got to his pick, he absolutely panicked and took a guy that he could have gotten in the third round.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
I mean, who's to say? But speaking of Mick Abel and somebody you compared his slider to, you gave it the same grade. That's Carson Ragsdale, and that's somebody they got in the fourth round. Somebody that you said has a 70 grade slider, and I don't think I've seen that anywhere else, but I would love to hear what you have to say backing that up.
Well, maybe he only had a 70 grade slider against Florida in the one start that I saw. So who knows? But I mean, the slider I saw in that Florida start, which for those who don't know, like against Florida in his last start, he pitched 4 innings and he struck out 10 Gators and only walked 1 against the number 1 undefeated team in the country in the Florida Gators, and he pretty much dominated them. He's a powerful fastball, and he was able to break off a disgusting slider that day. And I think the most encouraging part about his slider is that he's a year removed. Maybe, yeah, it has to be a year removed from Tommy John. Like, he missed the 2019 season. So the fact that his slider's already back to that level, I think is impressive. So yeah, it seems like a pitch that he can tunnel well with his fastball. It seems like he's pretty in on the power fastballs up and then sliders right off that. And when he can tunnel a mid-90s fastball with a hard slider like that, I think that day was like 86 miles an hour out of his hand. So you have the correct mile per hour difference there. And then it was really just falling off the table. And it looks like a pitch that's only going to get better as he continues to kind of rehab from Tommy John. And I think the Phillies got another really solid bullpen piece in Carson Ragsdale. And maybe with the ability for more, maybe there's an ability there for him to be even better. I mean, he's 6'8", which is the same height as Betances, and from what I saw with his slider, I think there could be a Betances light there. So yeah, being able to go into Gainesville and strike out 10 in 4 innings, I think is something that it's just hard to do. So yeah, I obviously like that selection as well, and for the money they will probably get him for, I think it's a good pick. It's a good pick. And he could save the money, and then go towards to Casey Martin and Nick Abel.
Yeah, the Betances comps are what really excited me about this guy. And pulling right off your Twitter, he had the 5th highest K per 9 in college baseball last year. And that's one thing that made me think, why is this guy hanging around until the 3rd, 4th, or we got him in the 4th round? Why was he still available? And I mean, obviously it's because his ceiling probably is a bullpen piece, but some might regard him as the greatest Carson ever drafted in Philadelphia. So
it could be a quarterback controversy if he decides to go play quarterback.
I think he could give him a run for his money.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much everything I had on this draft. One of the better drafts, hopefully, in recent Phillies history. There's a lot of excitement, a lot to talk about. Some of these guys really have a chance to make an impact soon, hopefully. And with more and more news coming out about these undrafted free agents, obviously, since it was only a 5-round draft, there's a lot of guys that still need to go to teams and want to be signed, even if it's only for $20K. And I'm really looking forward to a lot more of these guys coming out. Hopefully some hitters soon if they, go the undrafted route and not go back to college.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's important. Even going back to the 2019 draft, I mean, they drafted Andrew Schultz and Brett Schultz, 2 different spelled last names, but ended up at the same direction. And both those guys were also 95 to 100. So now you're adding all the undrafted free agents that are touching 100. You had Mick Abel, who's a starter that can touch 100. It's just, I mean, I can't believe the Phillies are actually doing this. So we're like, I don't know, 4 years away from having maybe an all-power bullpen. I mean, this is all perfect.
I would never believe it, given everything I've seen in my entire life as a Phillies fan.
Exactly. I didn't know it was allowed.
So a couple more things. One thing I wanted to ask of you is the team that did the worst this draft. And I know we talked about, very little the Red Sox and how Kayam's first draft went. But do you think they did the worst, or do you think there's another team that could have done a lot better?
Well, I think the Orioles passing on Austin Martin was insane. I think Austin Martin's a superstar. I can't believe any of these teams pass on him. All this just to take Heston Kjerstad, second overall pick. Like, I think they did all right, in the later rounds. Kobe Mayo's an all right upside pick, but I think I don't think he can hit. I don't see it. But I didn't like the guy they drafted in the second round either. That just didn't stick out to me. But for me, passing on the opportunity to get Austin Martin is just insane to me. So very disappointed in what the Orioles did, and I bet they were planning on getting Nick Bitsko in the second round, but the Rays said no, we're going to take him and turn him into a Hall of Famer. So thank you very much. But I just didn't like what the Orioles did. I don't like that mindset, and they have a new GM there, Mike Elias, who, I feel like I'm watching the 2016 Phillies all over again in the Moniak draft, where like, oh, we'll outsmart everyone and we'll go under slot and we'll go under slot here, and then we'll outsmart everyone by taking a guy in the second round, and we're going to be geniuses. And passing on a talent like Martin, I think, is just moronic. So, I would say them. But some really good drafts. Like the Tigers had an unbelievable draft. Just really, I thought, set themselves up well. The Dodgers had an unbelievable. Like getting Clayton Beater where they did was insane. And it's like, oh, that's why the Dodgers are just lapping everyone when it comes to this kind of stuff. But for me, really, the Orioles stuck out. The Red Sox stuck out. Like taking York in the first, and then Blaze Jordan is just like, I mean, what are we doing? Blaze Jordan might be okay, but you're hoping he's Reese Hoskins, basically. So obviously the upside there is power, but yeah, I didn't like either one of those drafts.
Right, and for me, when it came down to the morning of draft day, I made my own big board off of the select few that I had seen that had the potential to go to the Phillies, and maybe a couple guys above where I thought they could drop. And my big thing on the day of the draft was that I was praying that Kjerstad fell. He was my guy, just watching his swing, he had such a smooth swing. And then I remember I was driving home from the beach, and I said this on our last podcast, and I handed my phone to my girlfriend. I said, go through the entire draft. I'm missing the first couple picks. Just tell me who gets drafted. And for number 2, I was like, all right, is it Asa Lacy or Austin Martin? She said Heston Kjerstad. And I just looked at her like, okay, no, but who is it really? Did somebody text you to tell me that? I didn't understand why Kjerstad would ever go second to the Orioles, and I was shocked. And from everything you said about their later picks too, it doesn't surprise me that they kind of swung and missed. It does seem like it's a Phillies 2016 vibe.
Yeah, it's just take Austin Martin. What is so hard? Maybe Heston Kjerstad turns into a 35 homer, 280 hitter, but he had swing and miss concerns in the SEC. That's legit. It was so dumb. It was just so dumb. I hate seeing teams do dumb stuff, and passing on Austin Martin to take Heston Kjerstad, it's just such lunacy. And we're going to look back on it in 5 years, and we're going to be like, oh, well, that was stupid then. And guess what? It's really stupid now when Austin Martin is helping lead the Blue Jays to being the next Astros.
Yeah, that lineup is going to be dirty in a couple of years.
I might be a Blue Jays fan. I don't know. I mean, they're just so ridiculous. Pearson, Vladdy, Biggio, Austin Martin, Bichette, that's not allowed. That shouldn't be allowed. So it's unbelievable. But hey, we got a guy that I think could be an ace. So whatever, I'll take it.
Yeah, I agree, and it's really refreshing that the Phillies are finally taking the top guy available instead of going for those picks. And you're watching these other teams and talk about these other teams that are taking huge swings and most likely misses, and it's not the Phillies. We're talking about how we take some solid locks with Abel and Martin and all these guys. Like it's just really refreshing that they took a set thing.
Right. It was nice that they let the board fall to them, and they went for the top of the board rather than trying to do the stupid underslot stuff and trying to outsmart everyone. It was very good to see.
Yeah, I agree. So one last thing I wanted to bring up to you, and I'm sure you expected this coming in, but I want you to tell me where you think Nick Pivetta would be right now in the season.
I mean, how low would his ERA be? I don't know. Like, he probably would have been if the season was going off as usual. He probably would have been the 5th starter. It seemed like he was trending in that direction before spring training kind of shut down. So, seemed like he was going in the right direction at that point. But then I don't know what happens when Spencer Howard gets brought up. And it would be around this time when Howard would be brought up. So, yeah, I think he would be in the process of breaking out, and then Zach Eflin would move to the bullpen because Pivetta is far and away better, and he would have been pitching to like at least a 3.2 ERA. Now, what he would do is he would blow up in one start, and then everyone would tweet at me saying, "See, he's falling apart," and then he'd come back and have 2 straight really good starts, and I'd throw it back at them, and then he'd get shelled, and they'd throw it back at me, and it would be a fun up and down season. But I listen, I think he was starting to develop into something, and hopefully during this time he has been working on a splitter or something. So
just wishful thinking.
Yeah, I mean, you have time, buddy. Like, can we figure it out? So hopefully during this time he's working on that pitch, and he can come out and be decent for this Phillies team. But it seems like, well, they played 60 games and Spencer Howard and Alec Boehm are on the roster. I'm going to have a meltdown. So maybe he'll be another power bullpen relief option now that Sir Anthony is done for the year. Maybe he's the bridge to Neris.
I could see it. I could absolutely see it. And I remember you bringing up one time that he could be a future Josh Hader. And
yeah, well, that was probably after the episode where I said that he's a top 10 reliever in the sport right now. So I've said a lot about Pivetta that I probably forget.
Well, I mean, with starts and the one that always sticks out to me is his Dodgers start last season. You know, when he really shut them down for an entire start. And that's where I saw what Nick Pivetta could be, even with one more pitch added. But, I mean, I've always believed in him just as much as you have. I truly want him to be the 5th guy. I might have said Ranger Suarez deserves some consideration for the 5th spot, considering how good he was in the bullpen last season.
Ew. I bet you and Matt Klensack have fun, right? You guys get dinner together and talk about 91-mile-an-hour pitchers from the left side. Yeah,
no, we're talking about Ranger Suarez, not Cole Urban. We're sticking it to.
It's close enough. Close enough. Nah, Ranger's all right. If you don't have wipeout stuff, I don't really care. Like, he's fine, I guess. I don't know how his numbers were as good as they were last year. Like, there's just nothing with him that jumps off the page.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think if he were to have been a starter this season, he would have been a placeholder for, right. Spencer Howard or, anybody else, Adonis Medina, if he ever comes up. All those guys. And Morales. And, I'd be perfectly fine with Suarez as a long-term bullpen guy. Hopefully with Nick Pivetta if we call up these young guys.
Yeah, right. Hopefully Pivetta can be the fireman that Sir Anthony can't be this year.
Which is ridiculous, by the way. He should have. And I say this every time I hear Sir Anthony Dominguez news, and then I listen to your podcast, and it's the first thing you guys bring up is how, Sir Anthony Dominguez should have gotten Tommy John surgery the second his elbow started to hurt, and the doctor said no, it's fine. And it really upsets me because of how good he could be right now for this team or even next season. But now he's choosing to get the Tommy John surgery now. It's frustrating. It's such a Philly thing.
Yeah, it's classic that unfortunately for him, he wasn't able to get it done, right as the whole COVID thing started, because he wasn't here and he couldn't get back here because of the travel restrictions. So of course, in Philly's luck, they had to wait till last week to finally get it done. When it could have gotten done 3 months ago. So yeah, just the classic Phillies luck. But at least they drafted and signed possibly 5 more Sir Anthony Dominguez's. So maybe they'll be all right.
Well, we'll see. We'll see how many of these guys pan out. And I mean, like I said, these guys could have been 7th or 8th round picks given any other draft. They would have been right there. They would have been taken by other teams, but the Phillies, I feel like they did a very good job of picking these high velocity guys, and you touched on all of them very well. So thank you so much for coming on. We're already at 55 minutes. Went on a while. You did a great job breaking everybody down again. Hopefully we hear some more news of some more undrafted guys, and I'm really looking forward to it. Thanks a lot for coming on.
Yeah, no problem, man. I really appreciate it, and thanks for listening to High Hopes. It's my favorite thing in the world. So I appreciate that, and hopefully we can get baseball back on the field here soon. I mean, it feels like we're kind of treading in that direction. I hope maybe they can figure it out and come together at 65 games. But yeah, it feels like we're going to get some baseball this season. So we'll hopefully have the Phillies sooner rather than later.
Hopefully, man. Yeah, and thank you everybody for listening. You have been listening to the Chase Independent podcast here on the ANYP network.
A fighting man I used to be, revered and feared through Killarney. Now I'm back to hitching with the wind. But if Mickey Flynn should ever find me, I'll throw me caution all behind me and square off on that son of a bitch again. He cracked open a river too, he beat me solid through and through, and such eager my unconscious frame. I won me healthy sheriff fights, well lucky son, still have me life since Mickey Flynn beat me dumb and lame.